Hey everybody, Glenn here. So before we get into today's episode of Checking In with Anthony and Glenn, I wanted to say this. If you're listening to this, well then so are your potential customers. So now is the perfect time to advertise on Checking In with Anthony and Glenn. We're right in between a couple of sets of different advertisers, so I just wanted to take today's message to say to you that this is a great time for you to invest in our podcast so we can invest in you and your business and help you drive sales, increase awareness, and get people to follow you. So why don't you just drop me a line? I'm Glenn at rouse.media. That's GLENN at ROUSE.media. And I'll be able to help you. Oh, and if that's not enough to get you involved, a couple of times last month, the Checking In with Anthony and Glenn podcast was in the top 200 of every single podcast of the United States. That's right. We were competing against Joe Rogan podcasts. We're competing against NPR's podcasts, all of the Gimlet Media podcasts, all the How Stuff Works podcasts, all of those shows. We are now in the same breath as them from time to time, and it is no better time for you to get your advertising message out. So drop me a line, and let's talk, and let's make it happen. And now, let's check in with Anthony, hey, and me, Glenn.
It's Checking In with Anthony and Glenn, teaching you to be the hotelier that you wanna be. It's Checking In with Anthony and Glenn.
Anthony!
Tell me a joke.
Two guys walk into a bar.
Yeah.
I don't know.
You don't have a good joke?
No, I don't have a good
We're
joke.
talking to a guy that owns a comedy
We
store.
are talking to a guy, but you know what? That's the thing about comedians. Everyone's like, hey, tell me a joke. But it's not jokes. It's more about stories and experiences and being able to tell a great story that's really able to connect with somebody in a very real way.
Can I tell you a joke?
Your life.
No. It's not funny. Why are you making fun of me, Glenn?
No, that was
I'll tell you a
saying,
joke.
Yeah.
One day I actually asked this gentleman, I said, hey, you want to do a podcast with me? And he goes, sure. And I was like, oh, really? And it's become the joke of my life, doing a podcast
I
with
know.
you.
I really.
The first thing people ask me is like, why are you hanging out with that guy?
I know. I don't understand it either. But as long as you keep making foolish decisions, I'm going to stick around doing this show with you.
So who are we talking to today,
All right.
Glenn?
So if you've heard one of our recent shows where we talked to the head of the Mohegan Sun Resort, now I wanted to break it down a little bit. I'm like, we're up here. Let's learn some more with some cool people, and that's why we have Mr. Marc Weisenthal. He is the owner of the Comix Roadhouse here, which is country music, great beer selection, right next door to the Comix Comedy Club. So welcome aboard, Mark. Great to see you.
Thanks for having me.
So it's here at Mohegan Sun. It's inside Mohegan Sun?
We are, yes.
It's kind of where the Earth and Sky casinos come together. It's like a really great location.
So are you a comedian?
I am not a comedian.
You were a lawyer.
Business guy, but
So how does the Roadhouse and comedy come together? Why Mohegan Sun, and why the hell are you in this business?
that's a long.
It's a long story. It's a long podcast.
We've got time.
That's a long question, long story. So we've been in this in the business for 8 years, actually 9 years now, and we thought comedy was a growing space that we wanted to push into. And
why? Tell me the moment you thought it was a growing space.
We saw what was going on TV and on the broadcast channels, and we saw content them needing more content, and so therefore they were going to be looking for more and more comedians and giving an opportunity for more and more people to develop in the market and in the space. And as people start hearing about things on Sirius XM, start hearing about seeing things on Netflix,
right.
It's funny you say that, because about 7-8 years ago when I was first on television, I started hearing, well, we want to hire hosts that are funny. And they were going after comedians. So all these shows that were being pitched, they're like, well, let's find a comedian. And like, well, it's my show. It's like, well, we need a comedian. So it's funny you say that, because internally that's what I saw.
Right. I mean, comedy has really burst back into the scene. I remember I was part of it in the late 80s kind of a thing. I had a lot of comedy friends, and I was in an improv group at a comedy club on Long Island. And no, I was not successful at it. I was not. I just
shocking.
No, I was. You know who was in the improv group? I don't know if Kevin James, who's been amazing, super successful. So he was just so freaking incredible. Poor little immature, insecure Glenn couldn't get over that, and it kind of like derailed my whole self-image in regards to that. But
okay, this is not about you, Glenn.
No, but Isn't everything? No. Wait, that's what my mom told me. But I wanted to say that Netflix has really brought it back, and because there's so much less money to produce, I think what's happened is all of those hundreds and hundreds of specials that are coming out are really starting to now get the interest from the customers in the same way that you said, oh, this is going to be a great thing, and having them come together in the casino resort environment, I think, is just a perfect opportunity.
It's really worked well for us. Our partnership with Mohegan Sun has been excellent. They're a great entertainment venue. They attract a great demographic to the casino on a day in and day out basis. And we believe we work very well with them synergistically to bring people to property and also to entertain their guests.
So, in a nutshell, explain your space.
So we recently expanded. We
started with the Comix Comedy Club.
Comix Comedy Club with a small bar with a craft beer focus in our bar. So we saw the craft beer trend picking up over the last 5 years and thought we would get focused on that in addition to what we were doing on the comedy side. In the last few years, we've seen what's gone on in this casino, and one of the big spaces that this casino is very successful at is country music. And so what we felt was missing was a venue for country music fans to sit and enjoy country music on a day in and day out basis.
So when I go into your bar, there'll be a live country act?
So every Friday and Saturday night, starting about 8:30, 9 o'clock at night, we have live bands that'll be playing country music, a little some southern rock and stuff, but primarily focused on country music, great local and regional bands.
I recently went to Nashville to play golf with my friends, and I went to Tootsie's. I'm sure you've been to Tootsie's, right?
Absolutely.
I sat in the corner at a table. I was 2 tables away from the stage, and I was with my 2 best friends from high school. I sat there for 4 hours. I'm telling you straight up, it was the best night I've had in many, many years. I didn't talk to anybody. I didn't even talk to my friends. I just drank beer, which I don't really drink beer, and I listened to that music, and I felt just it was one of the best nights of my life.
Nashville was a big influence in what we did. So in addition to seeing how popular country music was in our area and at the casino, what we did see was the Nashville experience where you'd go bar to bar, walking down the street and just hear music and say, that's a space I want to be in.
And the music is epic. Like the people I heard, like there were maybe, I don't know, 8 bands in the 2 days we were there. Right. And I would say there was some better than others, but there wasn't one bad set. It was amazing,
and that's the type of energy we create every Friday and Saturday night in the Roadhouse. So, in addition to what we have going on the comedy side, we have the Roadhouse with these live bands, and our guests, just like they trust us on comedy, sometimes they know the comedian that we have on stage, but even if they don't, they know to trust us that we have curated and made sure that there's going to be a good comedy show. Right. It's the same thing that we do on our music side. So it could be a band they know that they've seen locally or they've seen regionally, or it might be a band they've never heard of before.
Have you had any major country acts just jump in and get on stage?
We've had some that have been here on property, but generally those have been covered by NDAs, so we haven't been able. I'm not allowed.
But you tried.
I'm not allowed to discuss that they were in the Roadhouse.
Oh, I see.
You can't even discuss they were in the Roadhouse. Oh, you poor thing.
Well, one time been there. Well, you know what? You're not allowed to discuss that you've been on this podcast.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, we really.
I appreciate it.
That's going to help with the promotional efforts for us. Yeah.
We're a very popular destination for the artists that are here on property.
So I like what you say, curating, because even though you focus on country, and when I was up here in July to attend the fish shows, you threw the country out the door, and you really focused on the audience that was going to be in house for a couple of days, from having the Welcome Fish Fans logo on your screen to having more of a jam band focus.
We had the Phil Adams group playing pre-show, and then we had Mystic Dead doing our post-show, and it was great. It's guys we know that are local, that happen to be huge fish fans, but it was the kind of thing that we wanted to create a vibe and energy in our room that we knew would make the customer happy.
That's really important about business, right? So about if you sell sneakers, you sell water, you sell music, doesn't matter. You reacted to something. You looked, say, okay, what is a fish fan? Who is a fish fan? Are they like Grateful Dead fans? Are they like Billy Joel fans? Who are they? What are they? Right. And then let's react to them. So to the point where we're changing our venue.
That's right.
To be more efficient.
And it was terrific because I had a hard time getting a drink. It was so crowded. in there, both pre and post show. And I think it set the right energy, and being located right next to the arena, what a great tool for you to have to be able to complement all the stuff that's going on in this massive 10,000 seat arena that does 150 things a year for you to be able to capitalize on.
There's no question. And the flow that we can generate and see from those
Right.
shows are great. This weekend we have Miranda Lambert coming in. And
into your
no,
bar?
Miranda Lambert
In the arena.
going to be in the arena for the weekend.
And NDA may or may not be in your face.
Right.
Never know.
You never know.
But we'll be looking forward to entertaining those guests both pre-show for dinner and post-show for our bands. And we've got
do social. I'm sorry, I may interrupt you.
No, that's right. And we've got great bands that we think are going to be very popular with the Miranda Lambert fans.
That's great.
When they walk out of the arena.
So you basically curate that list for her fans.
Absolutely. We're trying to make sure that we're balanced with the demographic of guests that are going to be on property naturally, people that are coming to the arena show specifically, and our guests that we are coming to our regulars that will come in week after week after week. And we want to make sure that they're getting the experience that they're looking for. Very typically, in an average month, we'll have 8 different bands on Friday and Saturday nights. So our regulars won't have a repeat of the same band.
That's terrific.
And we keep moving.
Now, do you do anything in geofencing where you, like, somebody's walking past, the front desk of the hotel and something pops up on their phone saying that there's a great band? Like, how's that work?
We've actually looked at the geo-targeting and the geofencing, but right now we're not live with that. We're doing more of a broad spectrum type of marketing. So what we're looking at is customers that are within 30, 40-mile radius. Because we believe we're bringing a product that isn't just unique to the casino,
right,
but a product that's unique to the market.
Well, I mean, if you're going to have, like, David Tell being a comedian here, and I'm 30 miles away, I'm going to hop in my car and come down.
Next weekend we have Ari Spears coming in.
Right.
Okay, so Ari Spears is somebody's going to drive, come in from Providence, come in from Hartford.
Right, totally.
Well, I have a company that may be able to help you out with that. That actually gets the people that are around this. Because, like, I wouldn't know that it existed because I'm not into that kind of, music or whatever. But now that I went to Nashville, I kind of am into that country music now. So if I was on property, I'd like to know that that's actually happening tonight, and it just pops up on my phone. I love it. What has been the biggest challenge of dealing with the specific comedy aspect of the business? Taking a comedian, getting him on stage, getting an audience to enjoy that. Like, what I would imagine that's a very complicated environment.
It's complicated and it's relatively simple. I mean, it is a supply and demand market.
Right.
So comedians are looking for spaces, looking for stages, and their representation and management are. At the same time, trying to get the right people that fit into the demographic that typically come to the casino or live in this or visit this market. Those are challenges. We've seen a big challenge in the last few years post the 2016 election with just the hyper politics of what's going on.
That's interesting.
And it's not right or left because there's issues on either side. But what we've seen is that people are very sensitive to whatever their position.
Well, there
is.
seems to be a heightened thing of political correctness, particularly surrounding the colleges and university circuit, that comedians are feeling like they don't even want to do those shows anymore because they have to feel that they're on guard all the time. Are you feeling that this is a same thing that's happening here?
We're seeing it a little different impact, actually. What we're seeing is more the empowerment of everybody's individual opinion. And so that empowerment leads people to say, that's offending me, where it's just part of a show that somebody isn't meaning to offend.
So basically, after somebody gets, there's an act, and then you get comments or complaints from your guests saying that a comedian was offensive.
Or the opposite, where they loved them, and it wasn't necessarily because they were outstandingly hilarious, but because they happened to agree politically with them or might have made a political comment.
So do you do anything? Can you say anything to comedians like, we want you to stay away from this?
We absolutely do not. I'm not sure whether we could or we couldn't.
I mean, you could.
I don't think
that they'll come.
I think the comedians won't come.
They won't.
We absolutely don't go anywhere near if you will, calling it censorship.
Right.
We believe the comedians are individuals, they're artists, they're performers. We're hiring them to entertain our guests, and we show them the respect that they should be able to do their set as it is. That's not to say that from time to time there might be blowback, positive or negative.
So then how are you able to negotiate what has to be a minefield? You don't know where they're going to pop up. Suddenly something explodes in your face.
You know what? You deal with it like any business
Right.
on a day-in, day-out basis. And if you have a customer that's disruptive, you deal with that individual that's disruptive. And whether they're disruptive because they might have had a bad day, or they might have consumed a little alcohol, or they're just disruptive because they
Right.
didn't necessarily like what was said. You deal with
And
it.
I would imagine that the comedians, as much as they don't want censorship, they're not dumb. They need to make a living. So I would imagine some of them don't, self-correct, and some of them like, you know what? I know where I'm at. I know who's in my audience, and I'm just not going to tell that joke today.
I think there's some of that going on. I think, unfortunately, they've had to tailor their sets overall to understanding that they don't know necessarily who's in their audience. And so they've taken some of the political edginess out of what they're doing to try and avoid those issues, because they don't necessarily know what they're walking into.
And to be honest with you, when I go to a comedy club, I don't want to hear one political joke either side. I just don't want to hear it. Like, I don't care. Like, I don't want to see the person next to me get offended. I don't want to see the other person say, "Oh, that's amazing." Like, I don't care. Like I'm in a comedy club. I want to get away from this nonsense. I don't want to hear it.
All right, but on the other, I'll take the other side of it. I love to hear that, because I love it when comedians can make the point and do it in a funny way that I think breaks down those barriers, in particular today, between right and left, and gets us to see each other as equals instead of someone being on a different team.
Well,
I would agree with Glenn, and I think, as I said,
Glenn's always wrong, by the way.
We've been doing it. We've been doing this for long enough that
Right.
we've been able to see the transition over the last few years,
Yeah.
and I think there's a natural avoidance of political contention, just to make it move forward, and I think that's somewhat unfortunate. It's taken some of the edginess as it relates to it, some of the contemporaneousness out of it.
Yeah. I like I said, I just want to hear funny jokes. I don't want to hear anything about politics. If I want to see funny jokes about politics, I'll just listen to CNN and Fox.
Right.
But if you look at what's going on CNN and Fox, it is funny. Okay,
That's what I'm saying. So that's where I go for my comedy. I want to go for comedy club. I want to hear real fun. And another thing is, I'm like, comedians are now legitimate. I think back in the day when I was growing up, you had Rodney Dangerfields, right? Remember, on the East Side? Mm-hmm. And like outside of Dangerfield and a couple of other comedians, Eddie Murphy, like when you heard someone who was a comedian and going around the country in all these dive bars, not that yours is a very nice one, but I'm just saying, like, they're all over the country. You like, oh, you're a comedian? Now it's like, oh, you're a comedian. Now everybody wants to be the next Sebastian, right?
Right.
Has he played your club?
He has.
He has,
He
really?
has. Yeah. Now he's in the arena.
Right.
So he's
That's amazing.
And then
he's
if the NDA says he can come over, but we can't talk about it. But think about him. He was just a guy that was grinding every day. Grinding. I'm a big Joe Rogan fan, so I listen to Joe Rogan. And he said, and I think Joe Rogan has been responsible in a large part, especially for the comedy out in L.A. and the Comedy Store out there, and how successful it's been in the last couple of years. And when he talks about all the comedians hanging out in the back, that's Joe Rogan's favorite part, where he's just hanging out with comedians. Sebastian is there, and he's very respectful, but he's listening. Mm-hmm. He's not telling jokes. He's not talking. He's just listening. He's sitting in the corner, and he's just listening. So when he became out this breakout arena-selling comedian, who's the biggest comedian in the country right now, like everyone, I wouldn't say anybody was surprised because he's really good, but it's like, that guy? Because he wasn't the guy that was like the comedian's comedian. He was like kind of sitting there just watching everybody.
But he was taking it all in and learning.
Right.
He was taking it all in and learning.
So how do you book these people? How do you figure out who's the right people, who's the up-and-comers, who should be the headliner, who shouldn't get that?
We have a lot of people on our staff that are very interested in comedy. So everybody's got ideas. We try to do a collaborative approach to bring it all together. And obviously the market's well known. I mean, so what we're trying to do is find a mix of both developed and developing talent. And so we use the different weekends that we have throughout the year, the different nights we have throughout the week, to pick who's developing and who fits into the right slots so that we can get somebody that's going to be building.
So,
and as I said, we worked with Sebastian. We've worked with a lot of people that have developed, might have started out with us on one of our Wednesday night off shows and developed into somebody who's one of our weekend headliners at this point or bigger.
that must be amazing to see someone like Sebastian that you knew back then. I mean, do you remember him back when?
Absolutely, I do. I actually remember talking to him about a house that he was buying out in L.A. So, yeah, I mean,
And
absolutely.
then you see him just go on to just massive success.
And we've seen that a few times. So.
Yeah.
Who else?
We've worked with Amy Schumer both at the club and as she developed. We've had Bill Burr in the club and watched.
He just had a show debut on Netflix. And
he's huge.
Yeah.
So,
All right. So, sorry. Go ahead, Anthony.
One more thing. Have you ever sat in the club and saw someone, I would imagine, just bomb so bad that it hurt, that it was painful for you?
absolutely. It's unfortunate, but yes.
Even the best guys bomb.
The best guys bomb, or sometimes people. Again, it's live. It's a live event. So what happens is they're doing their best, and they're interacting with the audience, and sometimes it works, and unfortunately, every
I
once in a while
imagine
it
with the
doesn't.
older comedians who've been doing it a while, they're like, all right, that sucked. It may suck less tomorrow, and just forget about it.
Yeah.
But how many times have there been a young comedian in your office saying, I suck at this, I'll never do this again, but you saw something in them, and you're like, no, keep going.
Good question.
I've absolutely have seen it. I've got some names in the back of my head, but I'm not going to share those names.
Yeah, of
No,
course.
no, I don't think you should.
Names right here.
No, but where you're like, no, like, and then there's people like I suck, and you're saying stuff. Yeah, you kind of suck. Don't do that again.
Right.
But people that like really bombed, but you're like, you have talent.
Absolutely, we see that, and as I said, it's a live event, so you're going to have, it's the same way, and we deal with customers that way. Sometimes the Red Sox have a lousy game,
Right,
and the guests don't go back to management and say, why'd I buy this ticket?
Unless you have a losing season, then they will.
Okay.
Or
If they just don't buy tickets, look at the Jets, for example. All right, but
You heard about Darnold.
oh
Right?
God, please. So
What happened? What happened?
Darnold's out for a couple of weeks.
Why? I didn't hear
They
that.
just announced he has mono.
He has mono.
Yeah, they think he's out for 3 or 4 weeks.
yeah.
Who's playing quarterback? Right?
I don't know. I've given
You
up
look
on them.
pained. You look pained.
I,
You're
like literally my whole life I've been waiting for them to do something positive. All right, but I do want to talk about that whole idea of bombing versus murdering on stage. It's like you can have a great routine but still bomb because of the weirdness of whatever's going on in the room, the vibe. Joe Rogan just said, I was listening to one of his shows the other day, he was reading a conspiracy theory book and it got him in the wrong mindset and he came on and he bombed and it took him like weeks to recover
hear that one,
from that. Yeah, this was years and years and years ago that he had done that. So there's so many things that you can't really detect, and I think it's like that in regular life too, right? Either you can find the zone and you could murder the room, you could be, or you could bomb out because of not being in the right head. How often do you see comedians psych themselves out, for example?
We think it's kind of rare.
Yeah.
Again, we're working with professionals, and we look at ourselves as being the best comedy club between New York and Boston, and we attract our comics are of a caliber that they're going to be in major markets all the time.
Okay, so
these guys are professionals, and
let me ask you the question this way then, because we got a lot of people that want to be awesome in their careers and stuff like that. What do comedians do to bounce back from those bad sets, keep that right mindset going, always try to attempt to get into the zone where they can have that out-of-body experience and crush instead of, bombing?
I mean, what we see is the guys that the men and women that do that successfully are the guys that are working at it, or the guys that are working at it.
And they have a bad memory. They forget last night they sucked.
They focus on the future. They focus on the go forward. They know what their plan is. They have a plan when they hit the stage, and whether they had a great night the night before or not a great night, they know what their plan is, and they're getting back to plan. I mean, I don't think it's any different than a ball player who has a bad at bat.
I agree.
And then says,
Just curious, do you ever have Bert Kreischer in your room?
we have.
Did he wear a shirt?
No, he never wears a shirt.
He does wear a shirt, but the shirt comes off.
I was Bert was on Travel Channel when I was on Travel Channel, and we were in an ad sales meeting, and we're in a fancy restaurant, and the young lady who was in charge of Travel Channel at the time, she just gave a speech to all the ad salespeople and to all the talent that was in the room. And Bert had to leave a little early. Now, I didn't really know Bert, and I didn't know he was a comedian. I didn't know anything about him. He's a nice guy. He was always sweet to me, always a sweetheart, always genuine. And the woman who was in charge of Travel Channel was just very conservative, very respectful, very conservative. And all of a sudden, Bert's about to leave to go wherever he's going. Right in the middle of the dinner, or right at the end of the dinner, he literally says, "All right, bye, everyone. I'm leaving," and he takes his shirt off and he goes, "I love all of you," and he walked out. Now I'm sitting there going, he's going to get fired. He's going to oh my God. I'm like, and they were like, oh my God, he's so great. I love him, and she loved him even more. I was like, if I ever did that, I would have been fired immediately. So I just find comedian. That's one of the reasons I love Joe Rogan. I just love the way they think. Mm-hmm. I love the way because most people they don't think they're they're the most calculating people in the world, right? Like they're very smart.
They're calculating about their spontaneity, right?
They think about that. No, explain that because most people would say, "What does that mean?"
No, they absolutely have a plan, but the beauty of most good comics are that the plan isn't obvious to the audience. Right.
And when I'm on, whether it be on a podcast or a show or I'm doing a speaking gig, I really I've never had anybody say that, but it's like I'm trying to be calculating about my spontaneity. And there's things that I need around me that allow me to be spontaneous, but if I'm not calculated about my space, I can't be.
Well, our comics, our headliners are going on and doing sets of 45 minutes to an hour. And so you can't do that amount of time without a plan. Right. Okay? But again, if it looks like somebody's working off of a script, that's not what any of our audience is looking for.
What's the one thing? I'm sorry, Glenn.
That's all right.
Just real quick question before I forget. What's the one? You don't have to mention a name, but one quirk that a comedian asked the club for that you were just like, wow, that I've just never seen anything like that. He's laughing. Why are you laughing? 'Cause I hit a nerve.
We've had requests for green M&Ms,
okay,
which was kind of weird. This was back before the M&M store, so you literally had to find a bag and go and pick through them. And then another one was for edible underwear. And I'm not really sure what they were using the green M&Ms for or the edible underwear.
Now, do they wear the edible underwear?
I chose not to ask any more questions, so we supplied it and moved on.
But the majority, so a comedian comes to your club and they have a request list, right? And is it typical?
Generally, in a club, the request list is pretty small.
Right.
It might be somebody who's a vegetarian.
It could be food related.
It's food related, but usually it's related to their food, the quirks of their diet. They travel a lot, so they want to try and minimize their food risks or food issues. So usually it relates to, I'd like to have some fresh fish if I can get that, or what. But we have a great restaurant that's part of our venue. Of
course. Yeah, I mean, you've got, and it's a lot of it's locally farm fresh, that sort of a thing. But I'm thinking again back to the comedian. You can only have chicken wings so many nights a week. Most comedy houses don't have things like smoked brisket, beer battered tenders, all of that kind of stuff, fried green tomatoes.
No, that's absolutely the case, and we find the comics love. I mean, we make a great grilled salmon. It's a bourbon glazed salmon, and like you just said, Glenn, then comics are used to eating comedy club food all the time. So to be able to be performing in a comedy club but be able to order from our restaurant menu is great. And frankly, the comics have the same experience post-show. They love coming into the Roadhouse and enjoying the band. So it's a comic that's done a set, and now all of a sudden they can hang out in our bar, hang out in the Roadhouse, and just enjoy the rest of the evening.
There's something about comedians and musicians. They overlap. Comedians want to be musicians. Musicians want to be comedians.
I just want to be Glenn.
It's so interesting.
it's weird how that happens.
And I want to be anyone but me.
Is there one joke that has stayed with you that you kind of use in your repertoire? Is like, that's the funniest joke I've ever heard in my life?
As I said, I'm a business guy. I'm hesitant to be talking jokes into a mic. So I don't know.
So all right, I got a question. How do you get involved with a major casino resort to even start to have conversations about creating a venue within its walls?
Good question.
We actually were operating at another casino that's kind of close to here.
Right.
And
What can that be?
Yeah, we had.
No idea.
I forget the name of it, but we were operating over there, and it was an opportunity where we had a transition opportunity, one of those inflection points in
Right.
our business.
Yep.
And we made contact with the management here at Mohegan Sun, and they were very interested in the idea of possibly having a comedy club, and it's been a great partnership. We came over here 4 years ago, and every day we've been happy with
Right. In our prior show that we've run here on Checking In with Anthony and Glenn, we talked to Ray Pino, who's the president and CEO of the particular resort, and we talked about creating all those different amenities. So I encourage listeners, if you haven't heard that show, to go back to it. So yeah, I think a comedy club is a real good element to have as part of all of the offerings in a integrated resort such as this.
We find it really works well, and it gets a good response from both the casino management, but more importantly, obviously, the casino patrons, because what happens is it gives people a chance to take an hour and a half.
That's right.
Off of whatever their game
Right.
plan is, and whether they're a slot player and they want to take a little break, or a table game player, or they're just here just enjoying the resort. We're putting on live shows 5 nights a week, so Wednesday through Sunday, everybody can always know that there's live comedy and something.
From a business perspective, it must be difficult to make ends meet in a comedy club where you're putting on 5 days a week. You have to pay the comedian. You have to, there's so much going on. And I'd imagine there's some nights where you have 20 people in the audience.
There are. Luckily, there's less of those, and more nights with a lot more than that. But obviously, what we're looking at is history, and based on our history, we're trying to forecast what we're going to be doing night by night, and then we set up what we think are reasonable show budgets,
Right.
Based on those. So certainly, our Thursday, Friday, Saturdays are our national headliners. We'll bring people in from New York, L.A., or one of the other major markets where they happen to live.
But don't you have to work around their schedule because they're on the road all the time?
Generally, our headliners, we're booking 6 months to a year out, and so we're part of their routing. And generally, they're flying in and out to come from their home to come to Connecticut for that weekend.
They fly into Providence?
Usually Hartford is their first
Hartford.
choice. Providence would be a second choice. But what we're finding right now is a lot of them are finding that they'd rather fly into New York or Boston,
Really?
so that they can get a nonstop flight.
Right, yeah.
Nonstop
It's easy.
flight.
It winds up being quicker than changing flights and all that.
Sometimes, yeah, it's a little less of a conflict. But generally, our weekend guys are flying in just for our weekend.
And they're doing how many shows on the weekend?
We do 4
4?
shows. We do 4. So a lot of other clubs do 5, 6 shows. But we've
5 or 6.
5 or 6. They'll do a weekend that'll start on Thursday maybe and run through Sunday. And what we have found is that we would rather have fewer shows that are more successful shows than necessarily spreading out that
Right.
And how many seats are in your comedy?
We seat about 300 guests.
300 guests. Yep. And on a weekend, on any given weekend, those 300 guests, it'll be a full house.
Yes, typically Saturday nights are going to be our busiest night. Friday night will be the next, but Thursday nights are always a very successful night too. And our ticket prices tend to have a little break on Thursday nights, so customers that are a little more price sensitive might.
What is the ticket price? Is there a cover? How's it work?
We charge a ticket price to get into our comedy club. Our music venue is no cover charge.
And the music club is open right onto the casino floor.
Yes.
So you could hear the music out of the casino floor.
Kind of like the idea is what's going on in Broadway in
That's
Nashville.
exactly right.
The idea is customers are walking by.
I like that. Yeah.
Okay. That looks interesting. That sounds interesting, and I'm going to go in and check.
Honestly, that's what happened to me when I was here back in July. I'm like, oh, this place looks cool. That band sounds cool. Let me go have a drink.
And that's exactly our concept, and the casino was very supportive of it. But as we talked about earlier, Nashville was a big influence in that, because if you go down Broadway, that's what happens. It's bar after bar with windows open, and you hear something you like, and you walk in and sit down. But going back,
so what's the ticket price typically?
So our comedy club ticket prices might range from $15 up to $50.
Right. So it depends on the individual, how well known they are.
And we also
et
have
cetera,
3
et cetera.
tiers of seating. So we also have general admission seating. Then we'll have VIP seating, which will be a reserved seating, a little more space, and then we'll also have front row seating.
Right.
Now, a
And
megastar comes into town, just happens to be in town, and says, "Hey, I want to do a set. I want to go up there for 20 minutes." How does that work?
Generally that's not happening here. That's going to be something that's going to more typically happen in a major market,
Right.
Okay, as opposed to
because you have to come here to be here.
Right. You're not typically going to be just in the area. And
But how if they're playing the arena and they just want to come here at the last minute and just warm up?
again,
Does that happen?
on the comedy side, not usually. Again, on the comedy side, generally the people that are starring on the arena stage or coming in for that arena performance, more likely what will happen is the opener for the arena headliner will know us, will perform in our club regularly, and they'll say, I'm going to be in town, I'm doing this show on Friday, can I get some sets
on Thursday or whatever it might
sets,
be.
do they get paid for that, or like, hey, you just give them sets?
Generally, we have a budget for the show, and if somebody wants to do an additional set or something, that's not something we'll normally compensate for.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, if you guys know anything about stand-up comedians, a lot of it is you've got to earn your cred before you even get paid. There's a lot of amateur nights and stuff like that. And I remember back in the 80s, a lot of comedians went on strike because they didn't feel like they were getting compensated.
So what
enough.
are the levels? Like if I'm a comedian, right? Say I'm a like a Burt Kreischer, right? So I'm a headliner, right? And then what are the ranks? Like the AA, single A, triple A? Like how's that work?
It's typically venue size is what is how people are going to be categorized. So Bert's going to be performing in theaters. A guy like Sebastian's going to be performing in large arenas. And then there's a lot of people that are club guys that are national club headliners, and they're great comics, and they've been doing it a long time, and a short time or a long time, and they just put on an excellent show. And a lot of guys a lot of men and women like to work in a comedy club. Okay?
There's an intimacy to it.
They're absolutely.
Who's one of the best comedians out there that's on the road all the time that most people don't know?
Oh, good question. I know he's got to figure out who he's going to say. There's so many going in your head now.
I mean, we work with a lot of great guys. They're always solid. They're always great performers. We have Orny Adams coming in November. A lot of people that follow comedy know Orny Adams. People that don't follow comedy might not know the name.
Right.
We've worked with Orny for the last few years, and we find his customers walk out loving him. Say, when's he coming back? I want to get tickets to him. And he creates a buzz right from the start. So,
what do you think about the state of women in comedy? Because I feel it's really it's come a long way in the last 10 years where I'm stopping to look at them as a woman comic and just looking at them as a comic now.
And I think certainly that's how we look at it from a business standpoint. I think that's how our guests look at it. I think we don't find that we have guests that say, I'm looking for a female comic, or I want to come on a night of a male comic. They're looking for somebody that they think is going to be funny, or again, going back to where we're curating it, that they've come to trust us that we're going to put on a good show.
Yeah, because back in the 80s, it was so the opposite of the way it is now.
And back in the 80s, one thing, again, I learned from listening to Joe Rogan is back in the 80s, like everybody was trying to get the set on Carson.
Right.
It was like there was one place, it was the biggest place on earth, and if you got Carson, that you can be the next Joan Rivers, right? The next David Brenner, whoever was really getting big on Carson. Now there's so many outlets that a lot of comedians don't want to go on those shows because it's 3 minutes. You can't really be who you want to be. You can't use curse words. You can't. So now it's like comedy is so open that now they want each other. We're trying to help each other. Whereas back in the 80s, if you got that spot, I wanted to kill you because that was my spot.
Right.
So there seems to be more sense of community among comedians.
I think there's no question there's that connectedness, and I think that's also been the impact of social media, right? So social media, all of a sudden, you can become viral relatively quickly.
I was thinking that compared to the older days where you'd go on the Carson show and then your phone would ring the next day, you're probably getting a higher percentage of comedians now that bring an audience with them than back in the day.
And certainly there's a lot of people that know about it. There's the national people that definitely have that audience and have that buzz. And then they, as you said, they have they have friends that help reinforce that buzz. So even if their social media channel isn't that large, they have friends that'll help bring them along.
Right. And sometimes friends help too much, and then you get Brendan Schwab's comedy special on Netflix that didn't do well at all. Yeah. So now, being a business guy, what happens when people get a little bit of money and they want to go in business? And I love comedy, so hey, John and Eric, let's go open a comedy club. We'll make a lot of money. We'll have fun. We'll hang out with our friends. That's never a good formula. I know that. So if I was there's 2 or 3 people who want to get into opening a comedy club, what are the danger signs? What are the things you would tell them to look for?
I think it's like any business. The reality is we're in the customer service business, we're in the entertainment business, and we're in the food and beverage business. So you need to be an operator, and you need to be able to bring all of those skill sets together. So comedy is obviously an integral part of what we do on the comedy side, but even as we've expanded into the Roadhouse, we've had to do a similar thing on the music side. But at the end of the day, what we're looking to do is make sure that the guest experience is great. And so we're trying to make sure our operation is finely tuned. We're trying to make sure our staff is walking around with a smile and ready to entertain and make the customers comfortable with what's going on. And we, like comics, are always looking to ask our customers, how did we do and how can we do better? So when a customer is in our venue and they're checking out, we have an electronic platform that's asking them how we do. After they've come to a comedy show, we survey them and say, did we, how did we do and did we meet your expectations and what can we do better? And so I think, it's like everything else, continuous improvement. It's it's trying to do the best thing, looking at things from a customer perspective and trying to get better every day.
Out of 10 comics, what percentage are invited back? Would you say it's a high percentage?
Of our weekend guys, because those are the guys that are the names that you would recognize, probably in excess of 80%. And even the 20% that aren't, most of them, it's more of a scheduling issue than necessarily that.
Okay, so what happens if they're doing well? They're not killing it or murdering it as the terminology. If they're not murdering it, because a lot of times when you're murdering it, no matter what happens, you're going to book. People get booked. But when they're doing okay, they're really good, but they're just rude to everyone on your staff.
You know what? We're in business to have a good time and to manage our customers and manage our staff and manage all of our relationships. And so we're definitely not looking to do business, whether it's a comic or it's a vendor or another employee that doesn't get along with everybody else. So
if you come in here and you do well, but you're just rude to everybody, you're not getting invited back.
That's typically not somebody that we want to be doing.
Is this a place to nurture your craft, or you have to arrive fully formed?
No, that's the beauty of our platform, because what we have is shows Wednesday through Sunday. So we have a bunch of shows. We have a show on Thursday night at 10 o'clock, which is more of a bringer show. It's really for the raw guy. It's not the open mic guy. But it's the guy who's really just above open mic.
Do you do open mic?
We do not. And what we used to do open mic, but we find in the casino environment, customers are on property and just randomly walking into our venue. And if we haven't had any curating of the talent, the customer experience isn't there. And so while open mic, most people know what open mic is, that random customer doesn't and necessarily walks out with a bad experience.
So whereas I would imagine, before I started talking to you, when I'm looking at a bad comedian, I'm just looking at a bad comedian. But what I'm hearing from you is when I see a bad comedian, I'm not thinking about comedian, I'm thinking about your venue.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Absolutely. It reflects on us, as every part of the experience reflects on us, right? So if the comedy is great and the drinks are great, but the food isn't what somebody's expecting, that customer's walking out and not feeling great about the experience.
One of the things I hear all over the country and all over the world is it's hard to find good people, right? And I've heard that from Yakutat, Alaska to, Knob Noster, Missouri, and Spain, everywhere else. Is it really hard to find good people?
Good staff?
Yeah.
We've been lucky to be able to find good staff. We believe.
I knew you were going to say that because of your attitude.
No, you know what? We have an environment that's a fun environment. Yeah. We're not a fine dining restaurant, so we don't require our people to be wearing a specific uniform. We can be somewhat flexible, and we want our customers to be engaged with by our staff. So we're looking for those friendly staff members that are looking for that experience. And so therefore, largely we're a popular venue to come to work for.
And that's very rare that I talk to a businessman and they say that. But I asked you that question specifically because I knew that would be your answer because of your attitude and the way you go about your business. And because most people, it's so hard to find good people. Well, the reason it's hard to find good people in a lot of places is because you're not a good boss.
Right.
and
That's a great point, Anthony.
And particularly in the hospitality industry, there's a lot of people that take advantage of staff. And what we try to do is understand that our staff is our connection to our customer. And that's the most important thing that we can do day in and day out. But again, our format, between the multiple concepts that we have going on at one time, allow us the flexibility to be able to be flexible with our staff.
The staff is the most important part. Matter of fact, Bert Kreischer, what he does is he basically at the end of the night he puts a bucket out for the staff,
right?
And then they do a number, and the waiter wins the bucket of money. So sometimes there could be a couple grand in there.
Wow.
And I think that was such a beautiful thing for him to do.
A lot of the comics will call out as they're wrapping up their set. Don't forget the staff. Make sure.
But he actually does a passing of the bucket, and then one person wins that bucket.
I've had comics that not only do they ask the guests to take care of the staff, that they take care of the staff.
Wow.
And I've had comics that have forgotten to take care of the staff that have called me up on Monday or Tuesday, said, I realized I walked out on Saturday night and never tipped the staff. I'm going to Venmo you $50, $100, $100, $200. Can I Venmo it to you so you can give it to the staff as their tip?
That's beautiful.
Okay, so
and then when they come back in, that staff remembers that.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the easy thing is to make that honest mistake on Saturday night and then just forget about it.
And do most headliners tip the staff?
My experience is that yes.
And how do they tip them? Based on? It's just a thing?
It's just a thing.
I think a lot of it comes from the fact that these men and women that do comedy started with their hardscrabble lives, right? Having to work for nothing, understanding how exciting it was to get that one chicken wing after you do your set. So I think they really appreciate great service and what those people have to go through.
And they appreciate being respected.
Right.
So not only do we as management and ownership respect the comics, but the staff knows they're dependent on the comics too. So our staff goes out of their way to be respectful of comics. When the comics are ordering their food, it goes into our kitchen marked as who's the comic or what their role is. Our kitchen knows that they're under a tight timeline because they're going to be performing, and the staff that's going to be bringing the food or the drink knows that they're coming, stays there that extra minute to make sure that they've got everything they need.
Yeah, I know when I'm on the road with my team, and it's critical, like you were saying before, is being careful of what you eat on the road because you don't want to put yourself out. And I always said, everyone on set could get sick but me. Because if I don't get sick, nobody works. Because I'm the host of the show, and so I try not to eat salad because I don't want to get sick. I try not to get. So I'm very specific about what I eat and the timing of what I eat. So, it's so critical, and those are the things that make a comic get on stage and feel good.
Right. And again, some comics like to eat before they go on.
Right.
Some comics like to eat when they come off. Some people want to chill and have a beer. And so what we do is try to be as flexible as we need to be to make sure that they have the great experience.
Because they're trying to find how to get into what they consider their zone. And for me, I do a lot of keynote speeches and stuff like that. I'm on stage a lot, and I have a regimen beforehand, and that food really does affect how you're going to be able to perform when you get up on there. If you eat too much, it could destroy the whole set, right?
Yes. That's exactly.
So being a business person, forget about owning the Roadhouse or anything else. What was your first job, and how did you become such a successful entrepreneur?
My first job, going back to when I was a kid, I was a golf caddy. Okay, so walking around a golf course.
So what did the movie Caddyshack mean to you?
You know what? I just remembered a lot of heavy bags.
Because that had to have been close to the same era, right?
It was close to the same era, and back in those days, they were heavy leather bags, and you'd work at a private club, and guys would have a lot of clubs in the bag, a lot of balls in the bag, and an extra pair of shoes because they weren't even waterproof.
Right.
So, but you're in the service business. Again, it was a tipped business, okay? So, you got your standard ticket for running around, but nobody could live on the standard ticket, and it was a matter of making sure that customer, the golfer, was happy.
I just saw a documentary on the plane about caddies, and there's actually a caddy school somewhere in South Carolina, and there's a lot that goes into it, and they say you have to be more psychiatrist than you have to be lifting a bag.
I was a 13, 14-year-old kid. I don't know that I was.
You're worrying about
I wasn't that kind of caddy.
Right. So, what was the one thing about being a caddy that you remember that stands out, either good or bad? besides heavy bags?
You know what? Caddying for some regular guys that were the betters that would always be able to win, okay, and watch the way they would be able to play, and that the pressure performers, they weren't walking around with a phony handicap, but when the push came to shove, they could always make the putt.
And were those the bigger tippers?
If they made the putt, they generally were the bigger tipper.
They were happy. So, what was your first business venture?
I worked in a number of businesses, in some manufacturing operations and a number of different things. And this was our first entrepreneurial experience, was my partner and I.
How did you decide to get into the world of comedy clubs?
We had some friends that were in the comedy business, and we just thought it was an interesting space. And
that owned facilities?
Owned one down in New York.
Mm-hmm.
And we thought that the space of doing it at a casino was an interesting environment.
I do, because I think it's better than putting it somewhere else in this area of New England.
Well, fish where the fish are, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because I think everybody's coming here and they're already primed for a good experience.
No pun intended.
You're probably getting a lot of. I figure that you're probably getting a lot of people that'll just do much more of the drop in than you would have elsewhere.
We absolutely believe that.
Yeah,
and by putting on a good product and delivering a consistent experience, we think we can.
I want to talk a little bit about the food and beverage program that you have. How do you go about sourcing, farm foods that are locally delivered, and how does that work with the local beer selections too?
So we've hired a great chef. He's been on our team now approaching a year as we were getting ready for this Roadhouse expansion. He's done a great job building relationships both with vendors and trying to engineer a menu that was easy enough for our customers to navigate, because in a comedy club experience, what we try to avoid is a lot of choices, because customers are going to be walking into a show looking for something to order from, and we don't want our servers having to spend a lot of time going through the options and explaining the menu. On the other hand, what we are looking for is to be a differentiator, and so what we've put together is what we consider a very good value-oriented casual dining experience.
Right. Excellent. And you have, 30 beers on tap?
We do. And as I said, about 6 years ago, we started seeing the craft beer trend really picking up, and Connecticut happens to be a hotbed for that. And so we had gone, when we first opened up 9 years ago, I think we had 2 beers on tap, both being classic domestic beers. And we went from 2 to 4, then we went from 4 to 8, then we went from 8 to 16. As we were building out here, we wanted to go bigger than that. And so now we have 30 beers on tap. And what we do is we focus a lot on local and regional breweries. We work with them very closely on what things our customers are looking for.
Right.
And what we become is we've got a couple of items that are consistent day in and day out, extraordinary beers that aren't necessarily available widely. And in fact, when we were talking earlier about the fish audience, what we found was a couple of our basic Connecticut regional beers that always are good sellers for us blew out the doors, because the fish people came from out of town, weren't used to seeing these things on tap, and said, wow, I'm going to drink it.
And that's the thing about that particular community, and I think it's even more widespread now. I'd be curious as to what are beer sales like for you, not in numbers and percentage now, of the traditional domestic American beers versus these craft beers versus like imported type stuff?
Although we have 30 beers on tap,
right?
Okay, and of those 30 beers, I would say about 6 or 8 of them fit into that domestic category, the basics. You would think that the vast majority of our business would be craft beers, but the reality is probably about half of our business is craft beer, and half of it is going to be those domestic core items. As I said, the fish crowd. One thing that sticks in my head in particular is Counterweight Headway, which is a Connecticut-based brewery. That we have on a consistent basis. These fish fans just
drank it all up.
Drank it all up.
Did they know it before they got here?
You know what? I think they, there's different networks of beer people. So I think beer people know good beer and know what beer is good in a certain market. And these are customers that aren't these fish fans weren't necessarily Connecticut people, so they weren't used to seeing counterweight heavyweight, but they knew that it was a good beer. They came in and they just ordered it like crazy. A fair amount of it ended up on the floor, but that was
I don't know if
another.
I want to hang out with these fish people.
It was a crazy 2
Yeah,
days.
you know, I got to take you to a show one day. You'll melt.
No, I'm good. I'm really good. I you know me. I'm I'm a loner.
Yeah,
I'm good.
That's good. Yeah,
I'll watch it on
I don't blame
YouTube.
you.
It was
Billy Joel's is as crazy as I get.
This was 2 days to remember. I'll tell you.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I hope they choose to come back here again. All right. Any other questions you have for?
No, but again, on behalf of Business Everywhere, thank you for running a great place, not only for the comedians, but also for the employees. Too many business people just want profits, and they don't understand you get profits by taking care of your employees. And everyone I've talked to at Mohegan Sun, and you as well, it's very employee-centric, and that means a lot to me.
Great. Thank you.
All right, so we like to end every show with asking our guests this one question. Tell us something about you that we don't know, something that might surprise us or be of unusual interest.
Unusual interest.
You're a comedian.
I am definitely not. I am not a comedian in any stretch of the imagination. I think most people I work with think I'm a workaholic,
right?
And it turns out that I'm a family guy and very focused on that. This is probably my surprise.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
How many kids do you have?
I have 4.
How old are they?
They range from 30 down to 14.
Wow.
Two children, 2 stepchildren.
Wow.
You know what's so funny is he runs a comedy club, runs food and beverage, runs it all, right? And he goes, I'm really family oriented. How many children you have? Do you see his eyes drop? He goes, 4. It's like, it's hard. It's really hard. I have 3 girls. He has 2 boys.
It's a lot of juggling.
It's real. Because being a workaholic, and I think everybody at this table could be accused of that sometimes, and when you really are family oriented, it just becomes, you're very cognizant of the fact that you work a lot, but that there's not a moment that goes by that you'd rather not be with your kids or your family, right?
Right.
But you still got to do both, and you got to do both well, and you figure it out
As best you can.
What do you do? What's your hobby? Sport? Anything?
You know what? With kids ranging from 30 to 14, frankly, for the last 30 years, my family and kids have been my hobby. I don't really have much else other than working and take.
What sports do your kids do?
My youngest, my stepson plays soccer. My another stepson played hockey, and they're
good.
Yeah, very good.
Yeah, awesome. So, Anthony, how about you? Tell us something we don't know.
You don't know that my first, most memorable experience at a comedy club was at Dangerfields. I was with my, at the time, long-term girlfriend, Suzanne Amster. I was with for 7 years. And we were with a bunch of friends, and we went into Dangerfields. And Sam Kennison, is he the comedian that passed away?
Yeah. Well, there were a lot of them, but yes.
Right. Sam Kennison was on stage, and talk about bombing. Oh, my God. It was horrific. Everybody in the place left, including us.
Is this before or after he was on the Young Comedian special?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I was 17 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old. However, I was very young.
Right.
And I mean, it was horrifying. Like there was not a funny thing that came out of that man's mouth. And as we were all leaving, he was cursing us out.
Yeah. Well, that sounds about right for Sam Kinison. I wonder if his material holds up today in our crazy political correct atmosphere.
I think he's a very funny comedian, and I think he's very talented, and I think everybody bombed, so I think that was just the night he bombed. I think it probably holds up more than most because it's real. It's like it's just crazy, lunacy. And I think based on what's going on in the country, it probably would hold up pretty well.
Do you have a particular stand-up comedian, Mark, that really resonates with you, or is it really the Sophie's Choice of comics? Maybe keep it to the old school comics.
I think it's the whole broad spectrum.
You know, I can't wait to the new Eddie Murphy comedy
Yeah,
special.
he's looking to do that in December, I think.
I still think Delirious and Raw are the best comedy specials of all time.
I agreed, but again, I think culture has shifted in such a way. I bet you if you look back on that and you start to look at his honeymooners gay material, I wonder if it'll resonate the same way as it did back then. But that's the thing about comedy. You always got to stay ahead of what the crowd's thinking. Sometimes just not give an F.
Talking about that, did you see when Sebastian he just hosted an awards show recently, and I don't know if you saw it, and his opening monologue was about safe rooms and about everybody being PC and, on and on and on. And everybody in the room's Hollywood. Right. They all got safe rooms and they're all PC.
I know, right.
And it's like, so you didn't hear anybody laughing. Right. And I was like, oh, my God. Right. It was funny.
And this is why I think comedy's so great, because it does, like we said at the beginning of this conversation, bring that right and left together to show out the inanities of both sides of what's going on.
There was one joke when he said, like, everybody nobody wins a trophy, everybody wins the trophy. And it was like, well, everybody in the audience kind of invented that. So don't tell that joke. So, Glenn, I got a question for you. And I don't know if you ever heard this question before.
Huh.
Tell us something we don't know.
Well, I've already told you that I'm failed at my whole idea of stand-up comedy. But what I didn't say on the mic was it's because I think that I was a little too well adjusted. I didn't have enough anger issues with myself to be successful in it.
You waited till later in life.
I do think it's like my biggest regret, though, that I didn't go ahead and pursue that. And it's something that I think about all the time. Now, I'm not going to say I was going to be any good at it or that I'm funny now. But if I had worked at it and figured out what the formula was in order to write those kinds of jokes and have that kind of discipline, I think it would have made a bigger difference in my life. And while I'm able to, like, sometimes bring humor to this show, every 6 or 8 episodes I'll say something funny, that I think that I could have done something with it that would have helped me better in life.
You could have been a contender.
Could have been a contender.
You could have been somebody.
I know, right?
I think I know a guy that can help you maybe get a gig.
I don't know. I'm getting old now. I don't know if I want to put in the 20 years of work to become popular overnight.
And that's what the thing is fascinating about listening to Joe Rogan and all his friends. Sober October's coming up. I'm looking forward to that. All the craziness of all his friends that are comedians and talking about that is the work. After he's finished with everything that he does, he goes to the comedy show. He's doing 5, 6, 7 sets a week. And he's grinding every night. Right. So talk about watching that, grinding.
No, there's no question. The guys work hard. It's a tough trade, and the more time you put, now 10,000 hours is being disputed, but comedy business seems to be a 10,000 hour.
Forget what people say. The 10,000 hour thing, though it might not be exactly 10,000 hours, is I think metaphorically correct. You really need to put in the years of work to understand how it goes. And one of the things that I love about stand-up comedians, and I'm sure you feel the same way about this, is the artful way that they construct sentences and words to create a very specific meaning that works. And if you use one word in a different way, it will not resonate the same way.
Even if your body language, you use the same words with different body language, it's not going to work. And, you talk about 10,000 hours, and I've actually calculated how many hours I've spent running hotels in my life. And the day that I got on television thank God I had 10,000 hours. Because there's nothing that came at me I couldn't figure out. Because of that, I really don't think you can do comedy or really anything well. Mm-hmm. I mean, think the reason your business is successful is because whatever business you were in before, you had 10,000 hours of just hard work and watching. And sometimes you don't have to be doing the work. You just have to be paying attention.
Right.
So, Mark, we've come to the part of the show where you get to plug anything you like. Tell us how to find you. Tell us how to find comics, all that kind of good stuff.
So we're Comix Roadhouse. We're located here inside Mohegan Sun Casino in Uncasville, Connecticut. We're at comixroadhouse.com. Our social handles are all Comix Roadhouse.
Smart.
We put on great entertainment, and we have a great food venue. And our music is second to none on Friday and Saturday nights, and our comedy is the best Wednesday through Sunday.
Nice.
And I can't wait to hear about the second venue you're opening that you guys are contemplating. So next time we'll have you come on and tell us about that.
Look forward to talking about that.
And so funny, you never said anything about that, but I know it's happening. Am I right or wrong?
He's making a face.
We'll see what develops.
We'll see what develops. See? No, because when people are successful, successful, and
Yep.
people are smart. People are like, they know they got something. You got magic in a bottle, and it'd be. I'd want to go to Vegas or somewhere else and be able to sit in your venue and get the same.
Well, all
get
the
experience.
places in Vegas are starting to put in the comedy clubs because they see it as a real smart, viable amenity.
Yeah, but I think you have something that I'm not seeing is like you have the vibe of the Roadhouse. You have the I don't know. It just seems that you have something that
But
most people don't.
There's something about having the duality of the live music with the comedy that I think makes for that perfect kind of evening. You have a warm up beer or two, listen to a band, go have a lot of laughs, then come on out and listen to some
And
more
you know
music.
what? It doesn't feel as to me. The concept doesn't feel as desperate. I'm going to hear a comedian, and if they're good, I have a good night. If they're bad, I have a bad night. This gives you different different venues.
You know, when we were coming up with morphing the comedy club into the Roadhouse, my partner and I talked about a three-ring circus of entertainment. And so the idea is that we've got the music, we've got the band, we've got the comedy, we've got the food, we've got the bar, and so we have a lot of different options for our customers.
So, again, just real quick before we end the show, being a business person, having a partner, why do you and your partner, why does it work?
We've known each other a long time. We've known each other well before the business started. So we've got a long history together, and there's a lot of comfort, a lot of trust.
Cool.
We bring different skill sets to the table, and we know that we can rely on each other's judgment.
Trust. Goes back to trust again.
Great. Again, it's Comix Roadhouse, Comix. Comix, not how you would think to spell Comix. Mark, thanks so much for being here.
Fantastic. Thank you, Glenn.
Thank you.
Anthony.
This has been absolutely terrific.
Thank you.
Anything you want to end this one up?
Where can we find you, Glenn?
Oh, yeah. I forgot about that part. I am at Traveling Glenn everywhere online. Be sure to check out No Vacancy News and all the other shows that I put out on No Vacancy. Besides checking in with Anthony and Glenn here, we do the No Vacancy podcast, Business of Hotels podcast, the Hotel Tech podcast, and Hotel Design podcast. Anthony, how about you? How
And
do we find
before,
you?
let me give a shameless plug to us. You know, we were talking last night at dinner. You know, one of the things that you and I are not good at is we're not good at selling ads for our
That's true.
our podcast because we have so much fun, and a lot of people come after us to buy ads on our podcast, and we've had everybody from Benjamin Moore and Cintas and others doing our podcast. So if you want to absolutely find the hospitality executive that makes decisions to buy product, you probably want to advertise on our podcast. I'm just saying.
That's right. Or
It's the first time I've ever said that,
Right.
but it's really true.
all right, or hire us to do a show at your hotel or resort or your annual meeting. We'd be happy to do that. And finally, last shameless plug is Anthony. I think we got to do. a Patreon type of a thing too.
Nope.
All right, he doesn't want.
I won't be part of anything that's a paywall. I won't. I don't
It's not
care.
a paywall.
You have to pay to hear us. No, I'm not interested.
All right. Well,
Because then I actually have to think about what I do to give quality information. This way I can do whatever I want.
All
If
right.
they don't like it, they just turn us
all right.
off.
So more shit content coming your way twice every week on Checking In with Anthony and Glenn. So thanks so much for checking in.
It's Checking In with Anthony and Glenn, teaching you to be the hotelier that you wanna be. It's Checking In with Anthony and Glenn.